Hey, it's Nikas. Welcome to the Skype session book studies. This week we're on chapter 4, We Agnostics. And We Agnostics is the chapter that, most people have God problems when they walk in the door, right? Most people, they come in and they see God in the steps like 4 times or 3 times, however it says. And, that's the first thing people do is they get turned off. This can't be for me. I don't... I have a drinking problem. I don't have a church problem. I have a drinking problem. And unfortunately, that turns a lot of people off. But I remember this guy who used to say, you know what? If God runs them out of the room, don't worry. Drugs and alcohol will run it right back in.
That's a good one.
It's the truth because, if you really are an alcoholic, you'll end up here sooner or later. And the idea that we're going to... watch what we say so we don't scare you because of God. It's just can't do that. But I think it's really important. And what I love about this chapter, We Agnostics, is it doesn't tell you what you have to believe. It doesn't tell you who you have to believe. It doesn't tell you how you have to believe. It doesn't tell you in what way or with what. It doesn't give you any direction on the who of your own understanding. But what it does do is it just creates this sense of your way is not working. This God way does, but you're going to have to find out what God means to you. So it's kind of like at some point in life we have to kind of get ready to make this investigation, actually start looking on our own. Actually start praying and meditating and asking whatever the heck it is to reveal itself to us. But it's like there's a certain sort of willingness that has to actually happen in order for God to, in that chapter 5 reading it says, God could and would if he were sought. Well, after people read that, I always go, if, because God can and will if he were sought. Can't and won't if he's not. If he's not consulted, if he's not asked, right? Or he or they or it or them, whatever it is to you. I have my own conception. And there's a they in it, and that's just how I refer. But I respect everybody's connection as. Hey, sorry about that phone call. Okay, so we were talking about God, right? And so I've got my own conception of God, and there's a they in it. But I respect everybody has their own conception, and that's really what this chapter is all about, is to get you to go start looking for what is real and true for you. Okay? So, I love that loophole. The God of your own understanding, that's a big loophole. How much bigger do you need it to be accessible? So, all right. So, chapter 3. What about alcoholism? No. Chapter 4. We Agnostics. In the preceding chapters, we have learned something about alcoholism. We hope you have made the clear distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. So the non-alcoholic is somebody who can control the amount of drink they take after they start drinking, right? The real alcoholic doesn't know when they're going to start, and once they start, they cannot control the amount they drink. That's the real. So are you a real one or are you not? And if you are... if, when you honestly want to, right, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if, when you're drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, and that refers to drug addiction, so if you can't control when and where and how you're going to use drugs, or how much, you're probably an alcoholic. You use drugs alcoholically. And I when I go to a CMA meeting, I identify as my name is Nikas. I'm an alcoholic who likes to shoot meth alcoholically. Because alcoholism, right, isn't a little drinky problem. It's a condition of mind. When I'm stone cold sober, my mind's always trying to get me fucked up. And body, once I actually get the substance du jour, whatever my substance is, into my body, I have this unexplainable occurrence of wanting more. I don't feel like stopping. I want more. So, if that's happening for you, you might be alcoholic. If that be the case, you might be suffering from an illness which only is like ring around word, only a spiritual experience will conquer. So, to one who feels he is atheist or agnostic, some experience seems impossible. But to continue on means, as he is, means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. So let's first let's talk about those two terms, atheist and agnostic. The chapter is We Agnostics. Agnostic is defined as it's a Latin word. Ag means without, and gnostic is knowledge. So if you're an agnostic, it just means you don't have knowledge. I don't know. It's like I don't know. So and an atheist though, atheist feels as though they have knowledge. They feel that they know exactly what God isn't. And so one is for sure there is nothing, and one is I'm not sure. The I'm not sure. Most people actually fall into the realm of I'm not quite sure. I can't be 100% sure. There's very, very, very few people in the world that are truly, truly atheists. And God bless them. That's if that's what your thing is, that's what your thing is. But most people, if they're really true, they can't say that they know for sure. And so as long as there's just a little bit of possibility of like, maybe, that's all that's needed. You don't have to know. You don't have to say, oh yes, hallelujah. No, just if there's an opening there of a possibility, then use that little small opening and do a little investigation, do a little search, from your perspective, from your point of view, from the authority of your own experience, find out. Go on a little adventure and, start doing some praying and see if something actually shows up for you. Okay, so to be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face, right? So do I want to die a fucking alcoholic with a needle stabbed in my arm, or do I want to live as a spiritual guy?
Right. Yeah, I want to
live. But it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue. Hoping against hope, we were not true alcoholics, right? So if you're not a true alcoholic, you don't need a spiritual solution. So just let them hope that they weren't hoped. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must. Must is another ring-around word, right? Everybody says it's a program suggestion. Well, I'm sorry, when the word must is included here, that's not very suggestive. That's not like you gotta. So must find a spiritual basis of life. Or else. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you. But cheer up, something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostic. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. Don't be worried or disturbed or unsettled. Okay? All right, so if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered a long time ago. So when you go to a meeting and somebody says, just don't drink and go to meetings. Well, if I could just not drink, I would just not drink and not go to meetings. So, it's like if I could just, a better philosophy, don't drink, that's a great philosophy. But you know what, it doesn't work. I can't not drink. That's my problem, is, you can tell me not to, but the decision's not mine. We already decided on page 24 in the book that I'm powerless. The power in choice is no longer mine. I am alcohol and drugs, bitch. That's the reality of it. I do what it says. So the choice isn't mine. So to just tell me, just use this better philosophy, well, if that worked, yeah, right, okay. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried, right? We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could wish these things with all of our might. But the needed power wasn't there. Why? Because we're powerless. We don't have the power. Okay. Then it says, our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed us utterly. So, you use your willpower. Willpower is great as long as you remember you're trying to use your willpower. But guess what happens? Shiny, squirrel, anything, something, pussy, dick, whatever. Something like takes over and you forget what you're not supposed to be doing, and you start chasing the thing that you're not supposed to be thinking about. And then what happens? Somebody pushes a drink your way, and you drink it. It's like in the book it talks about the peculiar mental blank spots, the peculiar mental twist. I can't remember exactly how it was, but there's just moments that you didn't even see it coming. I like my sponsor says, an obsessive thought is a thought so strong it pushes out all of the thoughts to the contrary. So it's coming at you, and all the ones that could save you, they're nowhere to be found. Right? It's a lie that presents itself as the truth. Right? So I'm powerless because the thought is actually coming from inside the house. It's like that horror movie. Oh my God, the phone call is coming from. Yeah, it's like that. The security systems. The one that has all the keys to your house is the one making the call. So yeah, I'm powerless, meaning those thoughts always win because I don't have the power to say no. So, all right. So again, lack of power, that's our dilemma, as it says on page 24. Lack of power. I don't have the power. We had to find a power which we, lack of power, we had to find a power which we could live by, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. That says in squiggly italics writing, a power greater than ourselves. And then I love the next sentence, one word. Obviously. But where and how are we to find this power? Well, it says, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Solve, for me, is another one of those ring-around words. I love that word, solve. It says solve a couple more times, and I'll point it out when it says it. But what does solve mean? I mean, solve means it's the answer. It's the solution. It's like the end of the problem, right? The problem is now solved. And ta-da! It's like that's what I'm looking for. It says a couple pages later, we'll get to, that living by spiritual principles will solve all your problems. What? Yeah, really. Like all of them. We'll get there. All right. So, that means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we are going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man, watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problem and explain our fellowship, but his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention the word God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored, right? I'm a gay guy, and I can't tell you how many homos out there are just not God happy because our whole life we've been told what you've been doing is wrong. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of pre-stigma. There's a lot of pre-understood ideas. There's a lot of prejudice that all of us just have to let go of. Prejudice just simply means your old ideas, your preconceived old ideas which you believe to be true, right? So those are the ideas you're just going to have to let go of. All right. We know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him, capital H, which really pisses people off, with which somebody had tried to impress them during childhood. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea altogether. We were bothered with the thought that faith and a dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. So, I understand what's being said there. I don't understand it anymore, but I understand what they're coming from because it's like, if you need God to you just, why need God? can't you do this yourself? Like it's some like there's a sense of weakness to it, but turns out it's not. We looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. We looked askance at many individuals. Askance means with suspicion. We looked askance at many individuals who claim to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who in the hell made all this stuff? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. So, I get both sides of that argument. It's like, like the wars of the world. I mean, like the Christian church doing the, what do they call it? They're rounding up the witches and, just this cleansing of human beings. And it's like, how can that be God, right? And yet, when you're laying in the desert and it's this beautiful summer night and you can see all the stars in the sky and it's just like, wow. Or you see these sunsets or the mountains here in Palm Springs. It's just like, how can this just not be? I mean, how can this not be God? I mean, it's the incredible amount of beauty. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found, as soon as we were able, to lay aside our prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. Even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. So that's a pretty important question, paragraph right there. So we have agnostic and temperament. I mean, that's me. That's, it's like I came in here with I saw God and I was like, I rolled my eyes. But what happened was I was so desperate that when the guy that I actually trusted, because when he talked about alcoholism, I knew that he knew what he was talking about. When he explained my story, and I'd never told it to him, right. I'm like, okay, you get this. You know what's up. And so since he said, God can do for you anything you can't do for yourself, start praying. You can even go so far as to ask God to reveal itself to you. Don't be shy, God's up for a little show and tell. So I did, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try. And sure enough, I had these experiences begin to start happening to me that were coincidental. And everybody says that coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. Because it's true. It's like after a certain amount of coincidences, you just can't not believe. I mean, it's like you'd just be silly to not, because it's the truth. So we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside our prejudice, our old ideas, all this old garbage, nonsense, blah, blah, blah of how God is not right for me and it can't ever be, once I was able to just put that aside, right? It's like, I always get the visual of, they have these monkey traps in the Far East where they put a banana inside of a hole and the monkey sticks his hand inside and grabs the banana and the monkey's trapped. And they're just like literally like they're monkey traps. All the monkey has to do is drop the banana and he can run, but he won't drop the banana. No, because that's his food. Fuck you! I'm not dropping this banana. And the guy comes up with a bap and clubs him on the head. I mean, that's how much I want to hold on to my old ideas. I'm willing to die. I'm willing to die for my old ideas that aren't working. They're not working. All right. So once we're able to lay aside our prejudice and express even a willingness, just that willingness to, okay, what? I'm gonna try. I'm gonna give it a shot. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm willing to start asking out loud to some whatever. I'm willing. We commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend. Right? So I didn't know, but the results was undeniable. Even though I couldn't quantify, I couldn't qualify, I couldn't name, but I'm getting results. And so then therefore, that little bit of belief turned into faith, and that faith eventually turned into trust. And now I just live in total trust. I just trust. Hey there, sorry, having a little technical difficulties. So much to our relief, let's start there. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. So, in Bill's story, right, when it talks about, when Evie's over and he's talking to Bill, he said, Bill, just choose your own conception of God. It says the two men talked for hours. Yeah, the two men did talk for hours, but it was kind of like the two men actually were arguing for hours. Bill's like, Bill, you gotta accept Jesus Christ in your heart. You gotta accept Jesus Christ. And Bill's like, nope, not doing it. Nope. And finally, Evie's so frustrated with Bill. He's like, Bill, just choose your own damn conception. Just choose your own conception of God. Whatever you want it to be. And that was like the magic. That's when AA ceased to be wasn't anything yet, but it became a spiritual program, not a religious, right? It's just because your own conception just leaves a huge, it's a huge window. It's a huge loophole for whatever your conception is to be. All right, it says, we did not need to consider another conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, however small, and however unknown, however minuscule, was sufficient to make the approach and effect a contact with Him. So what's important about that is it's talking about is to make the approach means that I'm going to be approaching God. God is always there. God is there 24/7, right? So the difference is I actually am going to reach my hand out and I'm going to offer myself to God. I'm going to accept God's help. But it has to start with me. That God could and would if He were sought simply means that, if He were sought, meaning somebody has to do the soughting. That's me. So, as soon as we admitted the possible existence, I love the way Bill writes here, creative intelligence, spirit of the universe, underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed by a new sense of power and direction, right? So if you're powerless, dude, having some power and having some direction, that's a pretty darn good thing. Provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard of terms for those who seek Him, right? To us, the realm of the Spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or foreboding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. So, unlike certain religions in the world that are like, you can be this and you can't be that, and this is okay and that's not okay, this whole idea of this omni-everything God, there's no rules. There are no should nots. It's just like, if you are, no matter who, what, or how, it talks about, like what's the Pope went and he washed the feet of the murderers. It's like, everybody is God's child. Everybody. It doesn't matter what you've done in this world. It's like, the Pope is going and honoring these people. They're God's children. Come on. Yeah. So, all right. Next page. When, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. So whenever this book starts talking about God, and, just know that it's not the God of your misunderstanding. It's the God of your own conception, whatever that is to you. And this also applies, it says, to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. So then it goes right on to say, do not let any prejudice, do not let any old ideas that you have about what God could, would or should be, do not let those you have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself, what do they mean to you? So, for me, I really had to get to the point where I was going on an expedition looking for God. Because if that's what is required here, I have to actually do the looking. I have to be willing to get outside of my own comfort zone and just go for a look, go for an ask, go for a prayer, go for a meditation. Right? I have to be willing to do that. At the start, this was all we needed to begin spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Afterward, we found accepting many things which seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, no matter how limited It was. All right. This next couple sentences here is called the confrontation. Confrontation says, we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe? Or am I even willing to believe there's a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him he's on his way. So that's kind of the confrontation question. It's like, are you willing? If you don't believe already, it's fine. But are you willing? And if somebody says no, then you know what? It's fine. But in my humble opinion, you just got to let them go. Because if they're not willing, my sponsor, do you have a drug or alcohol problem? Question number 1. Are you willing to quit for good? Yeah. Are you willing to go to any lengths? So that, are you willing to go to any lengths? I tell people right up front, that any lengths just means there's going to be some prayer and some meditation going on here. If you're not cool with that, it's probably not, we probably shouldn't work together. But if they're like, no, that's cool, then that's the thing I always refer to. It's like, well, you said you were willing to go to any lengths. And so if this is a God program and you kind of knew that walking in the door and now you're saying no, I don't know. It's not me. You're the one saying no. So
you have to ask for his help.
Yeah. So, okay. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual experience structure can be built. That was great news, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things by faith, which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we say, well, I wish I had what that guy had. I'm sure everything would work if I believed as he believed. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a really simple level. Besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, we were often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy. That means stubborn. It's like extra stubborn. Sensitiveness or unreasoning prejudice. Unreasoning is irrational, like an irrational. And prejudice is I know. I know. So when somebody's just like, no, I know. That handicaps us. Many of us have been so touchy that even the casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. Bristle just means like, ugh, your hair stands up on it. Ugh, I want to hear that shit. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Right? Let's read this. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. So our prejudices at some point were able to say, you know what? Because I'm willing to put this aside and just check it out, investigate. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. You'll hear that phrase used at meetings a lot of time. It's like, because alcohol is the great persuader, right? I mean, God will run him out of the room. Alcohol will run him right back in. It's the great. It literally beats us into a state of reasonableness. Okay. Why? Because, well, go do the other. It's just we end up relapsing. We end up just now. So anyway, sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one will be as prejudiced for as long as some of us were. The reader may still ask, why should we believe in a power greater than himself? We think there are good reasons. Let us have a look at some of them. The practical individual today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories for example about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of a doubt. Why is this ready acceptance? Because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point, right? So, I can't tell you how, but I can tell you if I go turn the fucking switch on, the light comes on. It's like that. So I believe. Something that I don't understand, I just believe because when I turn the switch on, it works. Okay. So, everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate, the prosaic steel girder, prosaic just means the boring ass steel girder that's hanging in the warehouse, is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence. Right there, our perverse streak comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it is not so. So, the atom in the boring ass, anything you look at, your glass table, it's like these atoms and these nucleuses that are like miles away from each other, whirling around at like rapid speeds that creates a sense of solidness that you can actually, it's like it's solid. But you know that it's not solid. You know that it's like there's all this empty space there. And yet you're totally willing to just not even question. Why question? But bring God into the equation. Right. Oh, no. Cannot be. All right. So, instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we, agnostics and atheists, chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the alpha, the omega, the beginning, the end. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? We, who have traveled this dubious, questionable path, beg you to lay aside your peasants. Fucking lay it down. Even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have been given purpose and directions to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of life, of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices, when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. Instead, we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. So let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like it's just Jimmy Swagger, Jim Jones. Who was the guy with the Kool-Aid? Who was that?
Oh, that was Jim Jones.
Was that Jim Jones? Yeah. And these people, Koresh. And yes, but there's Fruit Loops everywhere in the world. There are Fruit Loops everywhere. And some are going to be Fruit Loops for God. But it doesn't mean that God is just Fruit Loops. It said in Bill Story, it's like, to Christ I consider a great man, but to those who follow, because there's a lot of bummer to organized religion, but there's a lot of not bummer. There's a lot of amazing stuff, a lot of cohesion, a lot of there's a lot of good. Yes, beliefs can be a problem, but they can also, this belief in God, if you just distrust, it's anyway. I don't get lost on that. In our personal stories, we talked of an intolerance. We talked of intolerance, right? So we talked of intolerance. They're intolerant to me and my lifestyle, blah, blah. While we were intolerant ourselves, we miss the reality of the beauty and the forest of the trees we were diverted by the ugliest of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. So true, so true. In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation of the way each teller approaches and conceives of a power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make a little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. There are questions for each individual to settle for him or herself. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. Meaning, God could do for us what we could not do for ourselves. So it says quite clearly, came to believe that a power greater than himself could restore me to sanity. Restore me to sanity just means that with the idea of having a drink comes along or getting high, I just say, well, that's silly. So that's sanity. Sanity is knowing the true from the false. Insane is like, fuck it, and just, I'll deal with this tomorrow. Yeah, it's like, that's so this whole idea of turning my will and my life over, and then this thing actually working out in my favor. I mean, it's actually kind of a miracle. Kind of. All right. Here, as a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude towards that power and to create a certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in our way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found a new power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flow into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly, that means like 100%, met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seemingly futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons. They were making a heavy go of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say, so when a whole bunch of people are willing to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a pretty powerful reason why one should have faith. This world of ours had made more material progress in the last century than all the millenniums which had before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, the material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry research and innovation was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus's thought that a round Earth preposterous. Others came near to putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. So, back in the day, when there was the Pharaoh, the pyramids, I mean, you didn't not believe. I mean, you could have ideas about stuff, but you kept your mouth shut. Because why? Because the Pharaoh, nobody needs a smart mouth. Nobody needs a brain around here. We just need your muscles. Put your back into it, boy. Right? I mean, if you think about it, though, like in Columbus's time, Columbus is like, the world is round, and I'm going to get over here by going that way. And people were like, you're going to fall off the end of the earth, you idiot. And what did he do? He got here from going that way. I mean, it was like, it worked, but nobody believed him. The world was flat. It was flat. Everybody believed the world was flat, but the world's round. Galileo believed that we were the center of the Earth. It was heliocentric. Everything went around the Earth, right? I don't know, heliocentric means goes around the sun. So and he was like, no, it's heliocentric, meaning that no, we're all going around the sun. And people were like, no, you're going to put you to death for that because that's heresy. That's against God's word, and you need to die.
Yeah,
and they almost killed him.
Turns out,
we're all going around the motherfucking sun.
Right.
We ask ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of spirit as were the ancients about the realm of material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print the account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight in Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts of flight before failed, did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? This guy, Professor Langley, invited all the press out to his flying machine extravaganza. And what happened? His thing, I think they have like video camera somewhere. It went, and it just went right into the Potomac River. And it's all on camera. And so what does the guy say? The flight is not for man, it is for the birds only. Done. And everybody wrote that, and that's the truth. Okay. So, and then all of a sudden these guys from Kitty Hawk on a little bicycle fucking flippity-flappity, what? Yeah. Didn't go flippity-flappity. But, and they're like calling the press, hey, we're getting flight. We're getting there. And they're like, nah, I'm sorry. Flight doesn't really happen because, Professor Langley already showed us that it doesn't. So, sorry, we can't come out to your little farm there to see your little flying machine that's not really flying. Click. And they couldn't get a reporter to come out to cover this for the longest time. So, was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly, Dr. Langley? Had not people said that God had reserved the privilege to the birds of flight? Only 30 years later, the conquest of air was almost an old story, and plane travel was like in full swing. Welcome Pan Am, baby. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore a moon by means of a rocket. He will say, I'll bet they do it. Not so long. Remember this is 1939? This is before the moon. Right. Is not our age characterized by the ease in which we discard old ideas for the new? By the complete readiness which we throw away the theory or the gadget which does not work for something new which does? I mean, we're a disposable society. When your razor is dull, what do you do?
Get a new one.
Fucking get a new one. When the light bulb is burned out, what do you do?
Yep. Change it.
When your cell phone goes bye-bye, what do you do?
Right.
Even when it doesn't go bye-bye, you want a faster one.
And your girlfriend.
I mean, it's just like life is disposable these days.
That's right.
And yet our ideas somehow are not. I mean, come on. All right. We had to ask ourselves, why shouldn't we apply our human problems to the same readiness to change our point of view? We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. This is called the bedevilments. So the bedevilments is almost like the opposite of the 9 step promises.
Okay.
We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether or not we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others ring around word solve, their problems by a simple reliance upon a spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work. But looking over there, we see the God idea did. The Wright brothers, almost childlike faith, they could build a machine which would fly, was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. So, without that childlike faith, right? So that just that knowingness that we can do this. I mean, let's just keep trying. but it didn't work. Let's try again. Like just that's the essence of like creativity. That's like it kind of moving through you, and you're just, and you know.
Right.
So without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiently would solve our problems. When we showed, when others showed us that the God sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the rights would never fly. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Logic is great stuff. We like it. We still like it. It's not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, to draw conclusions, right? So the brain is not a bad thing. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with proposals which do not lend itself to reasonable approaches and interpretations. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than to not believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy. That means, not so good, right? Why when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, I don't know. All right, so here we go. This is called the confrontation. This little paragraph here. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that God either is everything or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? So, everything kind of leads up to this. It's like, if you're willing, and then you go looking and you start finding, and it's like, so
Right.
what's your choice going to be, right? Because you got a little, you've done some experimenting.
Yeah.
You've gotten some evidence, and so what's it going to be? Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We could not duck the issue. Some of us had already walked over the bridge of reason, right? So if reasoning is a bridge and you're trying to get to the shore on the other side, it's like, oh, you're walking. The outlines of the promise of the new land had brought luster to the eyes of fresh courage, of flagging spirits. Friendly hands stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we'd been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. That's natural. But let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stand by a certain kind of faith? For did not we believe in our own reasoning, right? I mean, think about it. Your reasoning, 2 + 2 equals, it's like all that reasoning, there's some sort of belief in it that happens. Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? Was that not but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, objectively faithful, to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. We found, too, that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, ourselves, girlfriends, boyfriends? And then, what a better motive we had not, and then with a better motive we had we not been worshipfully, beheld the sunset, the sea, or the flower. Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these levels of worship, these loves, these worships, have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw last. Were these things not the tissue of which our lives were consisted? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say that we had no capacity for faith, or love, or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance from A to B. 2 points. Yet there it was. Could we still say that the whole thing was nothing more than a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seemed more intelligent than that. And at least so said the chemist, right? So it's like this whole idea that there's just nothing going nowhere, just like it's like, and yet there's like the electrons are like
everywhere,
right? And super smart, and it's like it's like immutable law everywhere. It's like, really? All right. So hence we saw that reason is everything. We saw that reason isn't everything. Hence we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable. Though it emanate from our minds. Emanate means to come forth. What about people who prove that man could never fly? Yet we've been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Actually, we were fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. And that, to me, that's the sentence that I use from the book to talk about intuition. So, deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Do this. Don't do that. Walk away. Get out of here. Say you're sorry. So deep down in every single one of us is that knowingness. That, you know if you don't follow your intuition, you know what happens. Things don't go so well. If you do follow your intuition, things work out. You're in the groove. You just stay on the beam. Right? So, it may be obscured by calamity, right? Problems, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or another, it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves, and the miraculous demonstration of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was part of our makeup. Just as much as the feelings we have for a friend, sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there, capital H. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is there, only there, that he may be found. It was so with us. So, basically what that's saying is, when you're finally willing to just give up, when you're finally just like, stop fighting, just, just really, really look and be honest. Fuck. This intuition, can I explain intuition? No. Is it there? Yes. So, in the last analysis, I just stopped trying to fight. Right? We can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away the prejudice, enables you to be honest, think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourselves. If you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. So I love what that says there. It says, we're just hoping that what we got to say is opening up a door. Is opening up a window that you're willing to fucking go through. And it says, I love there. It says, search diligently within yourself. Take an honest look. Actually try. Try sitting on the edge of your bed and praying out loud till you don't know what. But your ideas aren't working anymore. We're saying the God idea does. Try it. See. Find out. So, with this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. That's probably the most important sentence in the book. I mean, it's if you try, it will show up. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. So, if your belief is I'm not going to believe, guess what? The consciousness of I'm not going to believe is going to show up. And if the consciousness of your belief is you're willing, guess what? Something's going to show up. I like there's another spiritual phrase that says, whatever you believe is true. If you say, oh my God, this is going to be so hard, it's going to be so long, it's going to be such a shitty day, oh my God, guess what? It's going to be. If you're like, we'll see. I don't know. It's like, if I'm not willing to say something's going to be hard if I don't know, even if I do, I mean, it's possible it won't be. Whatever you believe is true. So, in this book, you will read the experiences of a man who thought he was an atheist. His story is so interesting, some of us thought it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. His name was Fitz Mayo. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school, where he became very rebellious at what he thought was an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration. Business failure, insanity, fatal illnesses, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, even more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse, brought him to the point of self-destruction. One night, when confined in the hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience, right? So this is a guy who had found a power greater than himself, had found a solution, and was there to share.
He had been through it. Big time.
Our friend's gorge, right? So his throat, right, rose as he bitterly cried out, if there's a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me.
Wow.
But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question. Is it possible that all religious people I've ever known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he had lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came, and it crowded out all else. So, the great thought came, meaning that it didn't originate within his silly little mind. It came from outside what he knew, right? From the realm of all possibilities. Who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of his bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by the conviction of a presence of God. It poured over and through him with a certainty and majesty of a great tidal flood. The barriers he had built throughout the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He stepped from the bridge of reason to the shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. Thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. No later vicissitude, means like sudden unexpected change in life, has shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away. That very night, years ago, it's disappeared. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion has risen up inside him. Seemingly, he could not even drink if he would. God had restored his sanity. Restored his sanity. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. Right? Circumstances made him willing to believe. Alcohol, the great persuader, made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his Maker. Step 3. Even so, God has restored all of us to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly, but God, has come to all who have honestly sought him. Right? So, if you try to discover God, God will come to you, saying, when we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. So drew near is move in the direction towards. This is what we have to do. That's our part. Our part is to actually make the effort, and making, and that's the other chapter. Making the effort just simply means, at some point, this alcoholic insanity has to come to an end. And if I'm telling you that some prayer and meditation is what's gonna offer you this incredible sense of freedom, and you're not willing to take it, I don't know what to say. But for all of us that have tried and that did do that, it worked. As we drew near, he put out his hand. But it all starts with us. Be well.